Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for jumping into my presentation. I'm going to be talking to you today about this little thing called React. And I really enjoyed Paul Everett's keynote. It was a great lead into what I'm going to show you. I'm going to be talking about React and Plone. Plone, as you probably heard briefly, is a content management system that's written in Python. It's been around since about 2001, so we're coming up on 20 years. And it's a really secure, very stable, very fully featured, out-of-the-box content management system that you can use to build websites, portals, and intranets. And so I'll be talking to you about how we have had a project for probably the last 2 years now, in which React has been added essentially to Plone. And I feel a little bit like a bit of a traitor, although I'm not directly working on the React project with Plone because of what Paul Everett was saying just before about how Python needs to pick up its game. I've been working with Plone. I started working with Plone in about 2003 at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. And I had started as a developer for many years and eventually became a team leader because we were able to deploy about 350 websites to the university, a combination of public websites for departments and colleges and programs, and intranets, and a lot of workflow applications, which is a very interesting use of Plone with its content types and its customizable workflow and very good security. And so eventually, I've also become a project manager. I've been on the Plone Foundation board now for, this is my 5th year. Plone is protected by the Plone Foundation, which is a 501c3 that I guess protects and promotes Plone. So this is something that is one of the nice features of Plone that people who use it don't need to worry about assigning rights or worrying about the possibility of licensing issues using it. So as I said, Plone is a really stable content management system. It's kind of a shame that it's become less well-known over the years, but when I started using it, it was immensely popular. And I know, I think some of the conferences back then had hundreds and hundreds of people attending, but it's still around, and we've kept up, well, we think, with the times, a lot of significant investment of time and energy, and a lot of discussion, as you can imagine, in an open source community about where to go with Plone and what direction we should take this feature or that feature. But we're still around, and we're doing a lot of interesting things, as I hope you'll agree with me when I finish talking. So Plone is open source, very community driven. There is no single big company behind Plone. The Plone Foundation is, it has a board of directors with 7 of us, but we don't direct any of the development. We allow the community to basically run itself, run the development. So all of the features that go into Plone, that's not the board's, but there's a lot of very smart people out there, a lot of very good, very deep thinkers. Paul Everett was one of those. Of course, he left us, but we won't hold him to that. One of the very nice things about Plone that I like, that is one of the reasons why I continue wanting to deploy Plone, is that it's very secure. There have been no 0 days for Plone. There's an active security team. And so it's time tested. It's something that if you deploy, you can sleep at night, and I like to sleep. So Plone scales. You can make very simple sites, but really probably its sweet spot is in organizations that have a lot of content, especially organizations that have multiple editors. It's got great features for managing logins that you can give to people who have different permissions to edit things in different parts of a site. There's a nonprofit I'm helping back in Oshkosh, which has for years used a website platform a commercial one that has just one login, and anybody who's got that login can edit anything on the site. And as you can imagine, the people who run the organization are terrified of giving any kind of access to some of the volunteers who are part of that team. So when I talked to them about, hey, you know, I do this Plone thing, and here's one of the features, and I started talking about some of the features that I think are important, the thing that they really latched onto was that you could give different accounts to different people, and they could edit different things. And some of the students who are part of this team, it's a robotics team, can be given access to create pages, but they can't publish things. And that's one of the things about Plone that I guess for them is the killer feature. So Plone's security out of the box is fantastic that way. Plus, with some of the built-in workflow, it lets you create a page, and if you've got permissions, you can publish that page so it's visible to the world. But usually, you would have to submit it for review before someone else who's got the necessary kind of greater permission level will verify it and then decide this is good, and make some edits and then publish it. But that kind of workflow is something that Plone's had pretty much from the beginning. And I wish I could just kind of ping Paul here and hear some of the stories about how workflow got into Zope and Plone's built on top of Zope. So that workflow we pretty much have to thank Zope for. So yeah, Plone is fantastic for websites and intranets that have a lot of content editors who need to collaborate, and they need to be able to manage a lot of the content. So it could be a lot of images, could be a lot of PDFs, or just a lot of folders with different content in them. Say at the university, we had a lot of folders that would represent a department, for example, or a different team or a different project or a grant. So I won't go too much into more detail about Plone, but there's a client that we have at 6 Feet Up that has a need for multi-site management. So one install of Plone, and one of the key features they have that they need is multilingual support. And because Plone is developed by a worldwide community and is used heavily in Europe and other parts of the world, multilingual support is huge. And so Plone has that. And I think there's the user interface been translated to about 40 languages or something like that. And you can add more, but that's for them, that's a key feature too. So I just wanted to show you, let's see if I can, I'm not gonna stop share. Just want to flip over to, okay, let me just move this guy. All right. So I just wanted to show you some of the things in Plone, just briefly. This is, I'm logged in here. I'm just gonna log out here. So this is your standard Plone view when you're not logged in. And I'm just gonna log in with a high security password here. You didn't see that. And so this is the Plone 5 user interface. Once you're logged in, you get this toolbar on the left, and you can do a bunch of things, like you can look at your content kind of in a folder structure, which as I understand is a different way of organizing content than say for Drupal or WordPress, where I think everything goes into one big bucket and you kind of have to manually stitch together your navigation. But Plone is folder-based. It's kind of a file system. So if you want to organize things into folders, that's really the way that you think about content, content organization in Plone. So it's got all these, this folder contents view is really powerful because you can do a lot of filtering. If you've got a lot of different pages and contents, you can search for things. You can select them, edit them, move them around. You can edit them directly. But just adding content is quite simple. And so you got your add form for creating a news item. And summary, and then I won't put in too much anything here. So your content creation, content publishing, this is the workflow I was telling you about, where a piece of content is private to begin with, and I can publish it because I'm logged in as that high security admin account. If I publish it, then I can take a look at that, and let me see if I can get an incognito browser So now I can see it, but normally you couldn't. So, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but Plone, this is your Plone UI, and it's got a lot of power here for sharing. So this is the security I was telling you about, where we can decide that a piece of content can be shared and made editable, for example, by different users or groups. Later today, I think Anthony Bozio, who is a colleague of mine at 6 Feet Up, he's going to be talking to you some more about the workflow and security of Plone. But this is just a brief glimpse of what what we're now starting to call classic UI, Plone's classic user interface. And so this is what this talk is about. So transitioning away from this is done entirely in Python. On the back end, it's server rendered. So it's your classic, browser sends a request to a URL. The URL is processed and routed using Python, well, Plone and Zope, and then rendered and then sent back to the browser. There's some JavaScript here, but it's definitely a Python application. And so on a small site, especially when you've got fast networks, this is not a problem. But some of the issues that Paul was talking about in his keynote are some of the things that we're trying to address with Plone. So let me flip back now to, all right. So there's demo sites for Plone. So if you go to plone.com, you can try Plone. There's a whole bunch of information overview about Plone at plone.com. So the state of Plone, we're currently on Plone 5.2, and that is the big news for Plone really is that Plone 5.2 is now fully ported to Python 3. It's been a while coming. We made it. January 1st, 2020 is sort of the cutoff date, and so it was a huge effort, community driven. Some fantastic people just threw themselves into it, including people from the Zope community. So it was really nice to see them come back, kind of come out of the woodwork in a sense, and really contribute and make this massive effort. So Plone 5.2 runs in Python 3, and now the REST API is part of Plone Core. And so the REST API is that API, I guess the get out of jail card that Paul was talking about, where Python applications can just make this interface available on the web, and then any sort of front end can talk to this through this API to the backend store. And so this has been something that we've been talking about in the Plone community, which is Plone as a headless content storage service. And so Plone and Python running in the background, exposing themselves to the interwebs through the REST API, and then having something, this magic thing, talking through this API to Plone. So in Plone 6, we will have a new default user interface, a new default front end, as well as the current classic Plone UI. So what is the driver for having a new front end for Plone? Well, if you've looked at customizing Plone, we have some really good training classes. There's a Mastering Plone class. If you go to training.plone.org, fantastic class. I've taken it myself a couple of times. It's great reference material. I've had student interns that I've just said, why don't you read the first 20 chapters of this? And they come up to speed pretty well. But there's a lot here that you have to learn to customize Plone, tons of different technologies. And it's been a source of pride for me too, to realize that a lot of these technologies were things that Zope and Plone people came up with before there were more popular alternatives for them. So we were first movers in a lot of ways in the Plone and Zope world. But some of this stuff is really kind of, over the years, has gotten to be a bit much, and it's grown together to be a pretty complex stack. And again, it's all done with the server rendering all of the HTML for you. So this is a classic Plone, and that story is complicated for newcomers. And that's one of the things that we think in the Plone community is one of the obstacles or hurdles we have to adoption, which is it's hard to make Plone more popular when newcomers who want to customize Plone have to learn so much. Plone out of the box is this fantastic tool, and really for most use cases you can just deploy Plone, change the theme, and set up some groups and maybe connect to an LDAP system for authentication, and you're off to the races. But if you need to customize it and you want to connect it to some backend systems that you're running, it can be a daunting task to learn how to do that. So in JavaScript, there's a lot of different alternatives now for front ends. One of the reasons why people look to JavaScript is for its speed, its compatibility, it's being built into all browsers, and a lot of optimizations have been made in terms of performance for those implementations in the browsers. It's very mobile friendly. It's super popular. Pretty much every website now that you have, that you look at or that you build has to have JavaScript to give some of that interaction, that interactivity in the front end, and to give really fast responses. And certainly over the last several years, the tooling for JavaScript and the front end frameworks have matured. When Plone 5 first came out, so this would be about 2015, the JavaScript story for packaging, for requirements, dependency building, all of that was kind of new and changing very rapidly, and so it was difficult to kind of find a stable foundation, to build a stable foundation with JavaScript tools. And so Plone kind of stumbled through some difficult times when it was trying to come up with some of the resource registry. Oh, anyway, I'm getting in too deep, but the tooling definitely for JavaScript has matured. And so some of the front ends that have kind of come out in the shakeup have been React is the big one that Paul was just talking about. Angular is another one, and Gatsby, Vue. So these front ends are, this one in particular, for example, is built by Facebook, and it's open source, and it's very powerful. So why is it powerful? Well, you can do a lot with it where it will load things very quickly. You can, it's structured in components, and you can render a website built with React on the server as well as in your browser. So whether that's on your phone or your tablet or your desktop computer, and you can, there's a version of React called React Native that you can use to build fully functioning mobile apps with it. So especially since it's backed by Facebook and there's a lot of activity, a lot of support for it, it's a very popular front-end framework. So is it possible to take React, which is this sort of big thing in the JavaScript front-end world, and add it to Plone somehow? And I think you know what I'm about to tell you, which is yes. So the Plone React project, which was started probably about 3 years ago, was renamed Volto, I think just before the Plone Conference in Tokyo, just last November. So Volto, the icon here is of the masks that are used, I think, in Venice. So it's basically the front end for the new front end for Plone. So Volto has been kind of the answer that Plone has been looking for in terms of having the best of both worlds. We have React in the front end, the popularity of JavaScript and React, and we have the stability of Plone in the back end, which has all of the features that you could possibly want in terms of managing content, creating content, sharing it, having responsibility for it in the back end. But you have this really fast and very flexible front end now possible, built using React. So Volto itself is React. The Semantic UI is the theming portion of it. So Volto is built using Semantic UI, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's JavaScript, and because it talks to any, because Volto talks to any REST API, it really can obviously it's been built to talk to Plone's REST API, but there's actually another implementation of Volto. You can put Volto in front of faster, different frameworks in the back end called Guillotina, which is a fast async I/O. I guess it's an interface layer between for web applications that talk to databases in the back end. So Guillotina, I should probably have added a slide for Guillotina here, but Volto works with Guillotina, but also what I'll be talking about today is how it works with Plone. One of the concerns that Paul raised about any JavaScript framework that's used in the front end for a website is how does it behave when, say, Google comes to index a site. And one of the nice things about Volto is it has server-side rendering. So when you implement Volto, when you use the Volto front end for Plone, there is a initial rendering that's created of the website so that when Google comes to call, that first load of your website will actually be provided for you. So Google will be able to index that. And then while that first load is being displayed on your browser, in your phone, for example, then Volto and the JavaScript is being loaded as you're looking at it in the background, so that by the time you start clicking through on things, your site is ready to go and to interact with you. But that initial, say, 1 or 2 seconds, you get something on your screen right away so you can start looking at the website. And so you don't lose those first 50% of your website visitors by making them wait more than 3 seconds, which is a very important concern for anybody who's on the web these days. The other advantage of using Volto with your Plone site, for example, is that you can include other React components within your website, and you can make it, you can reuse a lot of these React components that have been built, because again, React is very popular and there's a lot of activity with React. The semantic UI I was mentioning to you is what makes Volto very themable and customizable. There's a lot of semantic UI themes that you can use, that you can, for example, there's very simple themes that make your buttons and other things, other components on your site look like, say, Amazon or GitHub or Twitter. So you can mix and match components and pre-built themes. But the one that we are using in Volto is something called Naga. And Naga means carrot in Catalonian. If you're wondering why Catalonian, it's because the drivers of Volto are in Barcelona. It's kind of an interesting thing because Plone's default theme for version 5 has been called Barceloneta. So there's sort of a powerhouse of Plone activity in Barcelona. So Pastanaga means carrot. I guess that's what that icon is on the left here. And so Pastanaga is something that Albert Casado, a designer in Barcelona, came up with as part of his mobile first conceptualization of how how a user interface should appear and how it should interact, how you should be able to interact with it. So it's designed from the ground up to be mobile first. And so that is what we have in Volto. So I just will show you. And so that is my Plone site. And that is a Plone site too. Where are we? Yes, okay. All right, let me see if I can expand this a little bit. This is a Volto site. As you can see, I'm just running this locally on my machine here. Volto is loading up. This is just for comparison's sake. This is what Plone looks like here. I hope you can see this. Oop. So it's pretty much mimicking right now the appearance of a standard Plone site, but the icons are different. Let me just log out here so you can see what it looks like. I don't know if you can tell, but the interaction time here is super quick. You just click around. It's super quick. I'm going to log in here. You see some of those icons are different. That was pretty fast. If you want to edit your front page, again, it's interesting how much faster it is in terms of the time between I click on something to the time I get a paint. So you've got the editing is a little different in Volto because there's and you can actually include different editors here, but all of this is something that you can drag and drop. These are small tiles. There are different things that you can do with these tiles, and I'm not sure I've got them enabled here, but this is a standard editing experience for Volto. I will go ahead and save that. All right, so creating items is basically the same as for Plone. Well, classic Plone. Here I'm just looking at some of the edit forms for Volto. So they're themed a little differently, but they behave generally the same way. It's just very fast. The content management story is similar. If you want to move things around, you can. You can cut and copy and paste content, move it around on your site. So this is, I would say, I think Volto still has a ways to go. It's, as I said, Plone 5.2 is the current version of Plone. The roadmap for Plone currently says that Plone 6 will ship with Volto as the default UI. So there's some question right now in the Volto, among the Volto developers, of how much user interface from classic Plone they want to bring into Volto for version 6. Is it going to be a one-to-one correspondence? There's still some question about whether that one-to-one correspondence is needed. So would all features that are currently visible in classic Plone need to be in Volto for version 6 of Plone? Version 6 of Plone probably won't be out for another year at least. So it's possible that for certain things, like Plone has content rules that make it possible for you to automate some of the things that you would normally have to do manually. For example, something that happens a lot on sites is somebody will create an image, they'll upload an image or a PDF, and they'll kind of forget to put it in a folder where it can be found easily. So you can make a content rule in Plone that just automatically moves images to an images folder or PDFs to a documents folder. And that content rule is something you can create through your classic Plone UI. But once you create it, do you really need to see it through, say, Volto? Most users are not going to need to interact with a content rule editor. So that could be a feature that doesn't get moved to Volto initially anyway. Okay. And I apologize if, actually, let me just check to see if there are any questions in the channel. Oh boy. Volvo and Volto, yes. All right. Let me just get back here. So Semantic UI that Volto is built on is the framework. It's the framework for theming Volto that has something like 3,000 different variables that you can customize. You can change to that level of detail and precision any aspect of the user interface that you want. It's built using components that you compose to make your front end. And there's a lot of activity around Semantic UI. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. And then in terms of your being able to customize components that you use, React components that you use, you can override them, you can create brand new ones, and it's all done entirely with JavaScript And so there's, if you go to training.plone.org, there is a Volto training class on there. And I encourage you to take a look at that to see some of the very easy ways you can customize. I mean, there's some maybe trivial examples where you can customize the font and the colors, logos, but you can create brand new views in Volto, sorry, using just one set of tools, and it's all in JavaScript, which again, if you think back to what Plone's stack looks like, you don't need to master 15 different things to be able to register a new page view or a new, say, dashboard. You can do it entirely in JavaScript. So that I think is going to be a very big change for Plone's I guess, popularity, or the potential for making Plone more visible in the JavaScript world among designers and people who are developers and comfortable with JavaScript only. They won't need to delve into all of the technology stack that Plone represents or needs. So with Volto, I know one of the key goals was to make Plone more visible in the React or in JavaScript community. So there's a lot of online resources that if you have, I would encourage you to take a look at some of these demo sites, demo Volto, and look at some of the documentation that's out there. Plone has just signed on with the Google Season of Docs, and our project, we have it's Chris Perez, who works at Cloudflare, is going to be writing and reorganizing and creating a lot more documentation for Volto. So that would be a really good thing over the next few months. There are some really good talks online about Volto at the 2018 Plone Conference site that was in Tokyo last November. So there's, I think, in fact, there's like 5 talks about Volto, different aspects of it. Some of the call to action that we have was one of the keynotes, and then obviously this one about Plone React, which was renamed Volto, and then the theming story behind it, and some case studies of sites that have already been deployed to production using Volto. Plone will be, this is the news item for Plone 5.2, where we've had, we explain a little bit more about what we think this is going to open up, and Plone 5.2 with the REST API and core is huge, because now anybody who installs Plone will have that REST API that they can build a front end with, including Volto or Angular. There is actually a Plone Angular project as well. The conference for 2019, the Plone Conference, will be in Ferrara, and there's going to be a lot more information about Volto and some of the activity behind it. I expect that we're going to hear a lot more about the new developments. There's been so many sprints around Volto that I think we're going to see some new fun things at the conference. So I would encourage you. The Plone Conference is notoriously inexpensive, and it's a great time. There's some really good, I know some of us have gone, many of us have gone to other conferences, and we find that it's just not, it's not the same as, there isn't the same vibe as at a Plone conference, where there's a great hallway track. A lot of people, you get to talk to anybody who's working on stuff, and you get to tell them, hey, you know, you need that feature. You need to add that feature, and they'll actually listen to you. I have a great story of the first time I met Calvin in DC at the conference, but I guess I probably won't share it with you right now, but get me offline, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And I did want to just say that I have really been enjoying working at 6 Feet Up. It's been a great company. I think we're doing great things here. There's a fantastic team doing Python and cloud. So if you have any questions, I'm very happy to to hear them and to try to answer them. And so I'll stay in the Slack channel all day, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your talks too.